Bruce Fein, Louis Martinez, and Ryan McBeth are our guests joining us tonight. You know, Ryan, Zelensky refuses to concede territory to Russia, and Trump seems to be surprised. He may be the only one surprised, by the way.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, look, Zelensky is an elected official as well, right? And he has to answer to his constituents. And in the original peace treaty which is essentially authored by Russia, requires that the citizens vote to change their constitution to prevent NATO to prevent Ukraine from ever becoming part of NATO. And that's kind of a tough order, right? That's a tough thing to convince your citizens to do, vote against their own security needs. So this is one of those situations where Zelensky knows that he can't give up territory because the people demand Ukraine retain their territory, and he can't concede to any sort of peace demands which require Ukraine not joining NATO. So it's one of those things where everybody has a lot of tough choices to make.
How did we get here? It seems as though Zelensky was not privy to have any input in these negotiations, and it clearly appears if everything favors Russia. In fact, it's as if Russia wrote the entire document.
That appears to be the case. And this is, how did we get here? We got here because of Russia. Because Russia wants to be Russia, and they're trying to reduce the amount of territory they have to defend. If you take a look at Russia, they've been invaded, I believe, 15 times in their history. So by invading Ukraine, they can capture Ukraine, and they have the Carpathian Mountains as a block. Then they invade Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland, and that takes a 1,400-mile border with essentially no rivers or obstacles down to a 150 or so mile border if Poland is captured. So this is kind of part of the thing. But how did we get here? You know, honestly, I think a lot of it is that the Trump administration wants this war done. They are essentially afraid that this war might continue to 2027, 2028. And at that point, if Russia collapses because they're spending so much money on this war, now we might be fighting China while simultaneously having to enter Russia and find all of their nuclear weapons and obtain those nuclear weapons so that warlords can't have them. Now, granted, Russia will still have the permissive action links, and those nuclear weapons would be controlled from Russia, but that doesn't mean you can't disassemble them or sell them to somebody else. So that is most likely the reason why Zelensky wasn't privy to this conversation. This could be a situation where the president is just kind of looking at the situation in Ukraine and saying, you know what, we need Russia not to win, but we need this war to end because we have to worry about China very soon.
You know, Louis, I actually had a chance to watch the Venezuelan footage, seeing those two individuals literally clinging to life, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, being blown to smithereens. Now, people can say whatever they want to say about taking out taking out those who are a threat to our nation, while the president pardoned one of the most dangerous traffickers, brought 500 tons of cocaine into the United States. It seems so hypocritical and such a contradiction for the president. But continuing along this line, this situation continues to escalate, and is there any end in sight? You know, I was with Senator Rand Paul. You're gonna get a chance to hear him later on in the broadcast, just before coming over today. And he's made it clear that there are senators that are demanding that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth appears before their committee. And even Senator Warner from Virginia has asked for his resignation. Louis?
Well, I think that the public can't judge. You said you got to see the footage of the two men, the narco terrorists, clinging to the wreckage of a boat. There was a closed doors briefing last week. Senators and lawmakers from the Republican Party came out saying that the explanation that Admiral Bradley and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane gave on the reasoning behind the second strike was valid. Of course, Democrats came out saying that it was troubling, disturbing, and potentially a war crime. Congress has every power to provide oversight, limit the president's authority to continue these strikes, limit the president's budget to move military assets to the Caribbean. So I think that, if lawmakers feel that way, they should go ahead and have a vote. If they don't have the numbers to pass that vote, that means that there's not enough lawmakers that agree with that logic. I do think that we will have a resolution to the tensions in between the United States and Venezuela very soon. We know that Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the Venezuelan opposition, is receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo this week and is accompanied by 5 Latin American presidents showing their support to the Venezuelan cause. And of course, the Trump administration maybe hasn't done the best job at communicating why the Maduro regime is a threat to national security in the United States. And the reason I bring that up is because as this is happening, as we're seeing mainstream media outlets on a daily basis criticize and use the word alleged narco-terrorist, alleged drug boats, the U.S. military is also bombing parts of ISIS in Somalia and al-Shabaab members in Somalia. No one's questioning that or the intelligence behind that. So there's obviously a political factor behind the emphasis on whether it is legal or not to strike narco-terrorists. And of course, it might have to do with the fact that they're here in the Western Hemisphere. It's bringing a conflict way closer to the U.S. that we've seen in the past 20 years. And that's a different dynamic, but it doesn't mean that they're not a national security threat. We know, of course, not only that a third of the cocaine that comes out of Latin America goes through Venezuela and is shipped out into Africa, into Europe, and into the United States, but we also know that the Venezuelan regime has close links to Russia. Venezuela has given out more than 5,000 passports to Lebanese nationals who have links to Hezbollah, and they're now operating freely in the region. With that Venezuelan passport, they can travel all throughout Latin America. So it is serious business. There's a reason why 1/3 of the U.S. Navy is right now in the Caribbean, and it's not just some idea that President Trump has by himself. This is something that the Biden administration, the Biden DOJ, indicted Maduro as a narco-terrorist. And I will say, Armstrong, I also don't understand the reasoning behind pardoning Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, who was sentenced by a U.S. court to have been a drug trafficker. That reasoning, I don't know if it's linked to what's happening in Venezuela or it's linked to the recent elections in Honduras and whatever the Trump administration has planned for the relations with that country.
Bruce Fein, earlier when it appeared as if when Syria had a regime change, that they may possibly be friendly to the Trump administration. But I must tell you, the escalation of the cycle of violence in Syria is horrifying.
It's not surprising.
What? Are we hearing Bruce here? Talk to us
You're
about
absolutely correct. I mean, it is pretty darn horrifying, but for the first time ever, the United States actually, I don't want to say they did a joint operation with Syria, but they coordinated with some Syrian armed forces in attacking ISIS. And that's the kind of cooperation that a modern nation state needs to do in order to enter the community of nations. I think some of what we're seeing in Syria actually has me kind of hopeful, mainly because it's what we haven't seen. While we have seen some violence against Alawites, which are a minority in Syria in the previous ruling class, we haven't seen crackdowns on women. We haven't seen crackdowns on Christians. So I am cautiously optimistic that Syria might actually turn into, yes, an Islamic state, but a somewhat democratic Islamic state. And that's kind of the best we can hope for with a region like Syria.
China is quiet.
Yeah.
Should we be concerned?
Oh, absolutely. China, it's China's been a nation for 5,000 years, and they have plenty of time to wait. I've often said that it is likely China will try to take Taiwan in either 2027 or 2028. They're already building the landing barges. They just issued a new rifle, the QBZ-191, which is a modern intermediate cartridge rifle for their infantry forces. And you're not going to do that unless you intend to use them. Their previous rifle, wasn't quite that good. It looked really cool, but the QBZ-191 is the perfect rifle for invading Taiwan. And they were able to issue these out in 2 years. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that now? Why are they building jack ships now, which are essentially barges that can float across the ocean? They have a large bridge that'll drop down and tanks can roll off these ships, and then ferries can come by and drop off more and more tanks. So those ships are being built as we speak. They're building another aircraft carrier. They're building cruisers, which is something
in a record time.
They have an incredible shipbuilding capacity, and we, America, just canceled our Constellation-class destroyer, or our Constellation-class frigate. We are going to build 2. And initially, I think we were supposed to build potentially, I think, 32 of these ships, and we're going to build 2. We just can't seem to get a new ship off the ground, and or I should say, in the water. We can't seem to get a new ship built, and China is just pumping these ships out.
Your voice, your future. We'll be back. And welcome back to the broadcast. Bruce Fein is joining us now. He was having a few audio issues, but hopefully we've resolved that. Bruce, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Armstrong.
You know, Bruce, the Supreme Court seems open to allowing Trump to fire officials at independent agencies without cause.
Well, except for the Federal Reserve Board, I'm not sure that stands together intellectually. But the basic idea is that if you're a principal officer of the United States and you're part of the executive branch, the president is accountable for the executive branch action, so should be able to fire them and hire them as he wishes. It is contrary to a decision made in 1935 when President Roosevelt was acting with virtually limitless delegated power, as dictators like Mussolini in Italy and Adolf Hitler were during Nazi Germany, where the court, I think, worried about dictatorship in the United States, upheld the ability of Congress to say you can't discharge principal officers unless there's some good cause. But I do think the indications are, I followed this issue many, many years, that the court will overrule that precedent. And I'm not sure how much impact it's going to have. After all, the president can ensure that they have a majority, at least one member, more than the opposition in any of these agencies, so they can carry them by 3-2 votes. But I think this is consistent with this court's trend to crown the president with virtually limitless power, including absolute immunity from criminal prosecutions for actions taken in the White House.
So you think this is unprecedented?
Well, I don't think they have cut away from Humphrey's executor over the last years. So it's not like, a counter-revolution in one stroke. They've been moving in this direction for at least 4, 5, 6 years. So it's not going to be a surprise to anyone in the legal community. And I'm not sure it'll have as dramatic an impact on the way independent agencies operate in any event, because the majority party has the ruling hand by 3-2 at least.
What is the impact of Alina Habba resigning her position as U.S. Attorney in New Jersey?
Well, it indicates that the effort that the Trump administration has used to use the Vacancy Act to get U.S. attorneys appointed who can't get Senate confirmed is probably a losing proposition. She is not going to be the U.S. attorney, which obviously has more power than where she's going to be in the Justice Department. Enormous amount of prosecutorial discretion. Mr. Trump has attempted to bypass Senate confirmation with these interim appointments. This is a Third Circuit decision, but it looks as though Trump is also lost in Virginia. In fact, he hasn't won in any of the cases so far, saying that he can appoint more than one interim U.S. attorney. Even after 120 days, they're supposed to leave if there's not a Senate confirmation. So I think this is going to be a defeat for President Trump to stack U.S. attorneys with these interim appointments who confront blue slips and opposition from the home state senators.
Ryan, we've entered another critical phase in the ceasefire in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Israel and Hezbollah, they're in a phase where Hezbollah has to totally disarm. Netanyahu just announced that Israel and Hamas has entered a phase where Hamas has to fully disarm itself. Many people don't see it as being realistic. Your thoughts?
So Hamas's days are numbered. Hezbollah might be a little bit different. I think one of the big issues is that Hamas is essentially cut off from any sources of weapons or funding. And their clock is ticking down. A lot of these guys are stuck inside of their tunnel system, and there is no place for them to go. And eventually the Arab world will get together a stabilization force, and they will enter Gaza. Hezbollah, a little bit different. They are essentially the shadow army of Lebanon, although they have been attrited down to a lot fewer forces than they had before. But they are able to access more weapons, although now that Syria has been closed off, Iran has been essentially spanked by Israel, and they have to decide, hey, do we put weapons toward increasing our air defenses so Israel can't operate with impunity over our country, or do we give money to a militia or send weapons over to a militia? Well, that's a very easy choice for Iran. Of course, they're going to try to defend their own skies. So Hezbollah might be finished as well, and I would imagine there's a lot of people in Beirut who are breathing a sigh of relief, because Hezbollah has been a huge problem for Lebanon moving forward and joining the community of nations.
Louis, I must admit, I don't know if I've ever seen the levels of corruption with Minnesota's governor, Tim Walz. And just think about the fact that the DOJ started this investigation in 2021. This was before Tim Walz became Vice President Harris's running mate. So obviously the Biden White House under Merrick Garland was investigating Tim Walz and his government. They were punishing whistleblowers, and still yet Harris selected him as her running mate, knowing about these investigations, this fraud, this corruption, billions of dollars going to terrorist organizations, Somalia, Ilhan Omar involved. It is just, even the Washington Post is slamming Tim Walz, that it's time for him to have transparency and to tell the people the truth. I mean, it's just unprecedented, Louis. The corruption.
I think that's sort of your establishment Democratic Party in survival mode, right? Like even Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is trying to brush the issue aside, mainstream media is not necessarily laser focused on a ginormous corruption scandal with overwhelming evidence and information coming out. We also know that during the Biden administration, during the COVID era, a lot of blue states, all of those billions of dollars in COVID relief ended up in fraudulent schemes, companies that were allegedly providing gear that weren't actually doing so, or people claiming COVID benefits who weren't supposed to be beneficiaries of them. So I think that when you mentioned that Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz, even though this was already ongoing, it's part of and unfortunately, you see it in many other countries with large-scale corruption. These people need to stay in positions of power and allow these things to continue in order to get voted into office again. It's no mystery that you have Democratic politicians also helping sanctuary cities remain sanctuary cities, aiding or at least focusing on the immigration crisis to try and allow for all of these illegal immigrants, people who broke the law to get into the country, to remain and find a pathway through citizenship, because it is a form of political maneuvering to stay in power. And it's terrible. And I'm going to go back to the example of Kamala Harris. What is she doing right now? Trying to make money out of selling a book where she's pretty much blaming everyone else except herself for the failures of the Biden administration. And I think it's a concept that we see politicians of both sides of the aisle, but most recently, more evidently in the Democratic Party, where they'll do anything to continue to make lucrative amount of money out of being political officials or being in the political realm.
You know, Bruce Fein, we would be remiss if we did not discuss your latest writings in the Baltimore Sun and also in other periodicals where you write your critique of the Trump administration's actions, particularly concerning pardons as potential bribery and presidential power abuse. Bruce?
Yes, are you asking a question? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I want you to respond on what your latest writings about these pardons.
Well, I mean, pardon is one aspect, and I want to underscore it's not just Trump. I mean, we had Mark Rich with Bill Clinton and Bill Clinton pardoning his own relationships. We have Joe Biden preemptively pardoning people unprecedented and pardoning Hunter Biden after he said he saw this as conflict of interest. So I think it's fair to say I've criticized a lot of presidential actions for a lot of reasons, and it shows the the limited power we have in the presidency. And I've criticized Mr. Trump too for his pardons, including what you just recently mentioned, somebody who is taking delight in cramming cocaine down the throats of Americans, and he's serving a 45-year term, and he gets a few months, and Mr. Trump decides to pardon him. I do think that the pardon power is very sweeping. It's very difficult to challenge it in court because no one really has standing. Congress, I think, has a role in overseeing the pardon power. It might be useful to have a statute that says you've got to wait at least 30 days after you announce a pardon, so public opinion could weigh in. James Madison, the author of the Constitution, opined that the Virginia ratification debate, if you abuse the pardon power, to shelter your friends like Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, they should be impeached and removed from office. But this, I think, is demoralizing to the U.S. attorneys who prosecute these cases. They're very diligent. The pardons go over their heads, and it undermines the rule of law. This is not isolated incidents where you have an actual examination of a trial and say this was unfair or the sentence seems really out of line compared to others. And unfortunately, it goes to a new level with each president. But I want to underscore that it's not an attack on Trump. It's an attack on these abuses that grow more and more in the executive branch when it has fewer and fewer checks and balances. And I've always remind people the successor to Mr. Trump is not going to surrender any power they've inherited back. And that's why I think, and continue to hammer, Congress has got to step up to the plate and do serious oversight. We have transparency rather than secrecy. And we have to actually use the impeachment tool where it ought to be used. And I think there are many, many instances with both Biden, and I asked and urged that he be impeached for various things that he had done. And once it's done by Congress one time, they won't have to do it again. But we suffer as a country when we have this one branch of government decides everything with very little debate. There's no public exposure. It's not constant, and we puzzle ourselves to understand what the coherence is. As you pointed out, on the same time, we're pardoning someone who's cramming cocaine down our throats. We're killing people who we say, without a trial, are engaged in drug trafficking. These are the same people in the first Trump administration were doing the same thing, and actually the country didn't collapse. So all these things, I think, go into underscoring the importance of surrendering power back to the legislative branch so we have more balance and equilibrium in decision making.
It's your voice, your future, coming up later. I'll sit down with Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. We'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com.
You know, Louis, I don't know if you watched the 60 Minutes interview with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the president's criticism saying besides from the low IQ guest, he certainly did not like CBS giving a platform. Where is this going? And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is more of a reflection of more Republicans that will come, given the fact that we have a 2026 midterm election, and these Republicans need to take care of the pocketbook issues. It's just not working. And many people are not living anymore. They're just surviving. If you talk to 7 out of 10 Americans, they'll tell you they're not a paycheck away from bankruptcy. They're a paycheck away from being homeless.
Yes, Armstrong, I think that the American public is consumed by the day-to-day headlines, but I don't think there's anything odd about seeing what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing and what we will see more and more Republicans on the Hill do in the coming months, which is start to listen to their constituents, start to listen to the tides of politics, and also try and safeguard their political future coming the 2026 elections, because politics is not lived on the news cycle of the day. It's lived on this calendar, and it's an electoral calendar. And what do we know as of now? The Trump presidency has reached the cusp of its power, maybe some months ago when they passed the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. But ever since that moment, it has been decreasing, not only in the popularity polls that we see on Trump's presidency, but just on the support that lawmakers on the Hill will give to the president's agenda when it's not going to benefit their re-election. And we've seen that on a weekly basis, how more Republicans are open to criticizing the president or of proposing ideas that go against the president's narrative. And that's just gearing up to the midterms. And that's what's supposed to happen. That's what the checks and balances are there for. We see some Florida Republicans like Maria Elvira Salazar even talking about also finding a way for Venezuelan migrants to remain in the United States, which is something that doesn't go with the Make America Great or the America First handbook. And that's, again, because they need to get reelected and the checks and balances are supposed to work. At least the incentives that politicians have to change their narrative, to change their views and adjust them in order to stay in power, those incentives are working quite well. I will say, back to something Bruce said in the last segment, I feel like most problems in American politics could be solved if Congress did its job, its oversight job over the presidency, if it didn't delegate so much power to the president. And I think that that's what we're going to end up learning from the Trump presidency. And it is that our lawmakers have the power to stop a lot of the things that are happening that they don't like. And that the Republican Party will have to evolve from a post-Trump presidency. And that is happening as we are speaking, and because they know that Trump is a sitting duck. He is not going to get reelected, and the 2028 election cycle is going to be completely different, and almost all the topics that got Trump elected are not going to be relevant then. Immigration is no longer the top priority for the American people. It's affordability. So the Republican Party and lawmakers on the Hill will have to evolve, and we'll see a new booklet coming from House and Senate Republicans in order to stay in power, or at least not bleed out as many seats as it seems that they will come 2026.
You know, Bruce, is fascinating. The president said last week he would release the video of the last 2 minutes of the Venezuelan boat, and then he literally changed his mind. Is it because of the uproar not only from Democrats but Republicans demanding that the tapes are released for full view? Because I'm telling you, if you see these tapes, you'll come to a different conclusion.
No, the likelihood, Armstrong, is he doesn't want to set a precedent that he has to yield anything. I was in the executive branch, and they're always worried about, well, if you do this, then they're going to demand something else. But I do think there's something even more important in those the killings of those who seem to be unthreatening to anybody and trying to survive, and that is the whole idea that we are at war. The president can make us at war with drug traffickers. Let's even assume that they are drug traffickers, though we don't know because there's never been a trial. And the drug trafficking seems to be headed to Africa and Europe, not the United States. And it's not fentanyl, which was the first reason why we're supposed to go to war for those who are engaged in drug trafficking. But putting that aside, there's something called the Declare War Clause that the father of the Constitution, James Madison, said was its most important provision. If it's that serious, you go to Congress and you have to get them to declare war. The president could say to anybody right now, based upon the precedent right now in the Caribbean and the Pacific, any drug trafficker is at war with the United States, and walk down the streets and shoot them all. There's no difference in legal theory between killing them on the high seas and killing them elsewhere. Once you define them as a military enemy, you don't have to do it. Then it legalizes first-degree murder. And that's now got buried in this preoccupation with these, the second strike. What about the first strike? Where did that come? You made them into enemies. They haven't declared, they're not armed and coming to the United States shooting weapons. They want to make money. And that's what I consider something that's been submerged here and is really quite alarming. Any president could say any alleged criminal is a warrior and kill them without due process. That makes us look like Putin assassinating his enemies.
Ryan, in the little time we have left, because we have Ryan Paul coming up, how are they going to remove Maduro from Venezuela?
That's an excellent question. Right now, it seems like they're trying to remove Maduro by giving graduated pressure on Maduro. We'll send aircraft over to Venezuela's airspace. We'll perform a simulated attack and then turn around. So that has been this graduated pressure trying to get this guy to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be president anymore. I'm going to go to Russia. I'm going to play Fortnite with Assad for the rest of my life. That doesn't seem to be working. Maduro seems to be dancing in the streets doing TikTok videos. So clearly that doesn't help. Most likely what we would see to start off with is SEAD, or suppression of enemy air defenses, where we go in and we take out basically every single surface-to-air missile system that could threaten any aircraft. Once that's done, the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy and Marine fighters can operate with absolute impunity over Venezuela. That makes things a little bit easier. Now you go after the boats. So you're going after any boats that can threaten the carrier strike group. And Venezuela does have some fast boats, patrol aircraft that can launch missiles if they can get close enough to the carrier group. Once that's done, the next item might be targeted strikes on some of Maduro's inner circle, or on Maduro himself if we can find the guy. He is moving every 4 hours or so. And the fourth thing might be to use special forces, or even the Marine Corps. We have an entire Marine Corps amphibious ready group, which is roughly 2,400 Marines, to actually do something like take a presidential palace. We don't have enough troops to actually invade, like an actual ground invasion, but we certainly have enough to take certain key areas and deny legitimacy to Maduro's government, forcing him to go to ground.
You know, I want to thank Louis and Bruce and Ryan for joining us. And when we come back, talk about sit down with Senator Rand Paul today and give you a chance to see it in its entirety. We'll be back. Thank you, guys. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
You know, earlier today, before coming over, I had a chance to sit down with what many will perceive as a Trump critic. I think he's one of the most balanced and most independent Republicans in Congress. An ophthalmologist who hails from Kentucky. We had a conversation today on a whole range of issues, from the ACA, Affordable Care Act. We talked about hepatitis B in children. We spoke about COVID. And these are the issues that many people care about. So sit back and enjoy a rare candid interview with a member of Congress, the Honorable Senator Rand Paul, who hails from the great state of Kentucky, where he really speaks to the heart of the issues that Americans really care about, that they're facing, that they're challenged. He speaks about it with candor, with compassion, and literally expertise. Senator Rand Paul. And we're out of here after this.
And a special edition of Your Voice, Your Future with Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. You know, I have not spoken to one mother that could make any sense out of why the CDC or anyone else would want to vaccinate their babies. You've had a lot to say about this. Everybody's searching for answers.
I think it's why so many people distrust the government, because there isn't a real good argument for giving your newborn a vaccine. The one vaccine they give in the hospitals is hepatitis B vaccine. And you say, well, how can my baby get hepatitis B? I want to protect my baby if I need to. And I say, well, your baby can get it through sex or IV drugs. I said, well, I think my baby's pretty safe. But they can also get it from the mom, if the mom has it. And so there is some argument that a vaccine and immunoglobulin antibodies to hepatitis can be given to a baby if the mom has it, and it reduces the transmission to the child. I'm not against that. It always should be the choice of the mom, but that's a reasonable thing. But that's 99.999% of all babies. The mom doesn't have hepatitis, and the mom's been tested. All the moms in America are tested for hepatitis. they don't have it, there's no real reason for the baby to have it. And in fact, if you want your kid to have a hepatitis B vaccine as they get older, when they might get involved with drugs or sexual contact, it actually wears off. If you give it to them at birth, it wears off by the time you're 10 years old. So you're going to have to vaccinate them again at 10 or 12 years old if you really want to vaccinate them when it might actually have some benefit. But there's never really been a good medical argument for doing it. When we had our kids, we resisted a little bit. We didn't have it in the hospital. We just said no. You can say no. But I am very proud of Secretary Kennedy and what he has done, and with the vaccine committee has reviewed this. And they're now agreeing with me that they're not going to really recommend that you have to do it for your child unless the mom has hepatitis.
So I want to emphasize something that you said quickly. The moms can say no.
Yep.
And the physician must respect the decision of the mother.
The problem, and that's why the people on the other side say, oh, it's voluntary, they can do whatever they want. Well, you can say no, but then your kid never gets in school, and you have to teach your kids at home. So ultimately, the decision-making comes when you go to kindergarten. Most public schools in America will say they have to have a hepatitis B vaccine, and actually most private schools follow the public schools. So unless you teach your kids at home, eventually the school system is what forces you to get vaccinated.
So why is it that if a parent has that kind of right, you already have a system in place where the parent is forced to probably give that child that hepatitis B? Do we need to change the guidelines in schools?
There used to be both religious and moral, philosophical exceptions to different vaccines. And it really used to be part of the medical, the Hippocratic Oath. And basically, if you were my patient, I would tell you and inform you about the risks and the benefits of anything, medicine, vaccines, whatever. And you and I would make the decision, and ultimately you would make the decision if you were my patient. And it's interesting right now that the vaccine committee is saying it's going to be based on the individual choices, based on the patient and the physician talking about it. It's like, that's not really that crazy. That's the way it should be. It should be between the patient and the doctor and a decision-making process, and everybody's not the same. It's like the COVID vaccine. If you were 85 years old in 2020, I'd probably tell you to take it. That's just my advice. I wouldn't force you to take it. But if your kid was 6 months old in 2020, I would have said, hell no. If he was 15, no. If he was 35, I'd probably say no. Or if your kid has already had COVID, I would say no. So it really depends on the circumstances. But ultimately, in good medicine, it's between the doctor and the patient, and it's voluntary. If you don't like my advice, you can go seek out another doctor and get advice there. But ultimately, you make the decisions. Only in this world of coercion, of Anthony Fauci and all these doctors who think they know better than everybody else, they didn't want to give you the choice at all. And that's why they're trying to jab every baby and the newborn, not because it's preventing hepatitis, because they want submission and they think it's effective while you're in the hospital to give you the shot. It has nothing to do with preventing hepatitis, because the only babies that are benefited are if the mom has hepatitis. And it's a very rare condition. If they do, I'm not opposed to giving, or at least offering them the vaccine if the mom has hepatitis.
What about distrust in hospitals, the healthcare system, and Big Pharma? Many people believe that these shots, whether it's hepatitis B or COVID, is being pushed because it's all about money, whether the baby gets sick. We just read this report where they kept it secret that in the lab where these babies were used for guinea pigs, 10 kids died.
Yep.
I mean, when a parent hear that, Senator Hall, this is frightening.
Right. I met a father just this last weekend, and he's a physician. His son's a physician. His son was 35 and a triathlete. After the vaccine, he developed an inflammation of the heart, myocarditis, leading to a heart transplant. So now, can we prove with certainty it came from the vaccine? But, someone should be looking into that. It happened after the vaccine. And these are real questions we should have. And the other question is how much of a risk was a 35-year-old triathlete for dying from COVID? Close to zero. Most people who died from COVID were pretty old. Many of them were overweight. There was an occasional thin version, but most athletic people, like a triathlete, didn't die from COVID. and yet he's, gone through a heart transplant now because of it. So people need to be informed, and people need to be able to make these choices for themselves.
Address Big Pharma, and it's all about greed.
It is about money, and people make the mistake that, it's about helping people and just trying to make people not suffer from disease. Well, it's also about money, billions and billions of dollars. And because these recommendations in the vaccine committee go into a school schedule, and virtually everybody has to have a kid go to, probably 98% of people's kids go to public school. So it essentially becomes a mandate, but you're enriching Big Pharma, basically. So Big Pharma makes a lot of money off of this, and they're not disinterested. So if somebody says, well, wonder what Pfizer thinks about this, I don't really think Pfizer is an objective person to weigh in on whether we should get a vaccine or whether or not you should have the hepatitis vaccine or COVID vaccine for children. An objective person, someone who doesn't receive money. Now, I'm not against money. I think earning money is part of capitalism, but I object to people making the money, making the decisions on mandating that we use their product.
What about the Hippocratic oath of medicine? First, do no harm.
Not only first do no harm, but really that it should be freely made, informed decisions. So they talk about what is informed consent, and that's part and parcel to the Hippocratic Oath, is that I need to inform you of the risks of it. Even with cataract surgery. Cataract surgery is the main thing that I did as a surgeon. It's very safe. But I always told every one of my patients, there's about 1 chance in 1,000 you could get an infection, lose your eye because of the surgery. And you have to weigh the risks of that versus that you can't see to read or drive anymore. And you end up making an informed decision that says, well, it's 999 chances out of 1,000 I'm going to do fine. But I have to realize that I have to be very careful washing my hands and touching my eye after the surgery so I don't get an infection. But you have to be informed of the risks of things. Same way, if you have a heart attack and I say we're going to do bypass surgery, you probably need to take the advice of your doctor if they say that. But at the same time, your doctor will say about 1 in 100 chances you don't survive the surgery, you might die because of the surgery. And you have to weigh those risks and then you make an informed decision. It's the same with cancer treatment, all these decisions. They aren't as black and white as people make them out to be. It's about informing people and letting them make the choice. But particularly with vaccines, people should be given a choice, and they should be given the odds and the risks and benefits of taking the vaccine.
We've observed and talking with many people, there's a common consensus is that people today are no longer living, they're surviving. They are held in mental captivity. Let me give you an example. The Affordable Care Act. Everyone knew this day was coming when these subsidies were masked to manipulate the true cause of making this in the law. Then we knew the day it would come where these premiums would skyrocket. And man, is it really hitting the man on the low total of the poll? Without question, it's destroying them. Thousands of dollars. And I know President Trump has said, let them expire. But then there are people like you who say, wait a minute. There are tens of millions of everyday people who, through no fault of their own, who will be further devastated if we allow it to completely expire. Senator Paul, where is the balance?
I think what we should do is do something to bring the prices down. So let's say your insurance costs you $20,000 and we give you $10,000 from the government. Next year it's going to cost $22,000. We're going to have to give you $12,000. We keep chasing the prices higher. What I want to do is let people buy their insurance as a group. So for example, 44 million members of Costco. If we all joined Costco and there were 44 million members and one person was in charge of negotiating, that person would call up United Healthcare and say, I got 44 million members. What price will you give me now? The difference is if I'm a physician, I have 4 employees, and I'm negotiating for the insurance for 4 employees, nobody's going to talk to me. They just tell me what the price is. I have no leverage. So insurance is a $1 billion company, and I'm just a small business. I have no leverage with them. But if I join Costco or Sam's Club or Amazon, I let them purchase for me. Now I'm guessing the person purchasing the insurance would sit down with the CEO of United Healthcare or Humana or any of these big companies, because you would have so much power that you would be able to negotiate prices down. This is a way to make capitalism work for us. So I have a bill, these plans are called association health plans. I have a bill to legalize the ability to join a cooperative to negotiate your prices. And it's funny because some of the words I use, collectively bargaining, co-op, the people that promoted Obamacare did, but then they never allowed it. You also have to let people buy what they want. So for example, if your wife is 60 years old and she's had her children, she's not going to be children, you shouldn't be forced to get pregnancy coverage. That's one way to save money. Maybe you've now lost your job and you're having to go down to a job that pays less and you're 60 years old. You shouldn't be forced to pay for pregnancy coverage. You should be forced to pay for in vitro fertilization. If you want it, you should get that coverage. But everybody should get something different. If you are 25 years old and you make $25,000 a year and you're in good shape, you should get catastrophic coverage. You should pay all your doctor bills and get something that costs very little. Obamacare offered those things, but what ended up happening was that you had a high deductible and a high premium. So I think there are ways to fix these things. Ultimately,
are you in the minority with this direction? Do you have other support among your colleagues?
When I talk to most people in the Republican caucus about these association plans, they all kind of nod their heads, and none of them really object. But they're all really not considering it seriously because I've had trouble getting it into the proposal. Now, in the first Trump administration, I went and talked to Donald Trump in the White House, in the Oval Office, and he agreed with me. And by executive order, he tried to do these association health plans. We really had to change the law. The executive order didn't go far enough. And then Democrat attorney generals sued him. And in the end, they weren't really that successful. I've talked to him again. You know, I have some controversies with him on occasion, but I did talk to him recently, and we exchanged some text message back and forth. And he says he wants to support this idea again of letting people bargain to get cheaper prices for